Welcome everybody to our webinar today. Our topic is Managing Veteran Originators. This is Pat Sherlock. For those that are new to our webinar series, I'll be sharing my company's research and best practices from our clients in mortgage banking. My company QFS helps managers by solving their sales problems from high turnover to low productivity. Some of our clients are the leading firms in the mortgage banking industry, and we're going to share what we see out in the field. Today I'm going to cover what works in reigniting the fire in veteran originators, a topic that I know is really important today. So I know that you're busy, and so I'm sharing what really matters on this issue for improving sales results. Any questions need to go through the chat feature on the right-hand side of GoToWebinar. I'll attempt to answer as many questions as possible, and you can always email me. I love to hear from you. Well, let's talk about what the problem is, and with this managing of veteran originators. The problem looks pretty much like this, and I want to thank Mike from US Bank who gave us this topic for this month. When you look at the veteran originator, we're talking about somebody that's been 20 years in the business and might have worked the whole 20 years at your firm. They were very successful at one point, not so much now. And there is a lot of conversation from these individuals about wanting it to be like the old days. So I know everyone's head's nodding that you have some employees that are like that, and that's what we're going to talk about and how to handle them today. So when you look at the veteran originator who was previously successful, it really kind of is a dilemma between the good and the bad. And when you look at the situation, the good is that the originator might be well known in the marketplace, might have a lot of contacts over the years, has extensive product and company knowledge, and really might even be internally very well liked. The bad is that they're complaining and whining today, that the business isn't like what it was. They can impact the rest of the team, and they really are fighting an unwinnable fight. The easy way out, and what can the manager do, is you can certainly fire them, but you lose a lot. As already mentioned, these individuals bring a lot to the table. And keeping them, however, really can impact your team. So what is the answer? The answer really falls in the lap of the manager. The managers are really the key answer in this situation. Firing, in my view, is the easy way out. The manager has to be a leader and have the skill sets to influence change. Because the truth is that change is always hard and requires the highest skill set of the manager who must lead it by motivating the individual employees to make a jump into the future. And the employee, frankly, may not want to go there for two reasons. The two reasons fall into lack of knowledge and a lack of willpower, which I'll explain a little bit later. We all know that change is very difficult, can be very painful, it's very uncomfortable, and as humans, we're pretty much hardwired to avoid pain because it really is a sign of danger. And even scientists will tell us it is an instinct, which is good most of the time. Our body knows that placing your hand on a hot stove is very painful, but pain is not always actual danger. And sometimes it just represents the possibility of danger, which is exactly what the pain is associated with business change. That's really what it is. So the bottom line is that change many times is moving the originator that is comfortable and safe into unfamiliar and what is perceived as unsafe by the employee. This is why change is always about fear and always about anxiety in the employee that the manager has to address. The fear is from, as I've mentioned, two sources. A lack of knowledge, we don't realize that we need to change, and a lack of willpower, we know we should change, but we are not motivated to change. So what is the formula to move someone that really is stuck in a status quo that doesn't work anymore? And for change to happen, not changing has to be more uncomfortable than staying the same way. Because change really, again, is about fear and anxiety on the part of the individual loan officer, or it even could be a manager. As managers, we are tasked to find the motivation to help the employee to make the change. And this is really the key for the manager to be successful in having the employee jump into the future. So there's 5 action steps that I want to share today, which will help the manager in helping the employee make the change. And I'll start with talking about a problem and then talking about the solution set. Number 1 is changing too much too quickly. Again, as a manager, when you're implementing change, you are talking about making small changes. Therefore, you are able to arrive at small success, which leads to momentum. So again, changing too much too quickly is really a recipe for disaster. It's making small changes and therefore having small success, which leads to momentum. The second step is discouragement from past failures. Maybe the employee has had different efforts in the past where he tried to make a change or she tried to make a change, but it ended up being in a failure, maybe because they were trying to make too many steps versus doing the small steps, which we've already mentioned in step 1. So when you're making changes and helping an employee make those changes, it's really important that you make it a learning experience. So step 1 and step 2 is about making small changes, therefore determining small success, which leads to momentum. Second point is making it a learning experience. If you want the employee to make the jump into the future, they have to go through a period of where you are addressing them being uncomfortable and therefore addressing this whole issue of how do I get them to do something different that's now required when we sell. A lot of times what I see from a consulting standpoint that the hub of the issue for originators that maybe are not changing really is this issue of lack of prospecting, and we can talk about that a little bit later with Mike. But the third step in helping the employee make a change is to recognize that you have to have difficult conversations. What are the facts? You will be surprised, or maybe you're not surprised, so many times the employee doesn't know that they have to make a change. It hasn't been told to them directly. They haven't been given the facts that the old ways don't work anymore and do require a different approach. That's very true in selling today because as a result of so much information from the internet and from a variety of different sources, the old ways don't really work because the customer comes to you doing their research, and by the time they contact you, they really are further along in the buying circle than they have been in the past. So what are the facts? The manager has to have a difficult conversation and a fact-based conversation on why the previous approach doesn't work anymore with the employee. Fourth, the effort from the employee standpoint, they are really making a decision, is it worth it to change? Well, that's, again, a conversation that the manager needs to have with the employee, which is really pinpointing the benefits for changing. How will this change impact them? And it's more than income. It has to be also tied together with what is their motivators. We've talked about in previous podcasts, and I really would recommend you go back onto our website and look at some of the previous podcasts where we discuss the recognition and motivators of individuals. Very important concept for managers to understand. There are roughly 9 motivators, and you have to tie into what motivators that particular person has. We cannot assume that's just all about money. And fifth is knowing the actual steps to make a change. And that's all about the manager developing a customized plan of action for that individual. We're talking about making small steps. We're talking about making it a learning experience. We're showing them the facts that they must change due to the fact that the marketplace has changed in many different ways. We're showing the benefit. Maybe by making these changes, they'll have more time at home. In other words, whatever it is, their motivator should be the benefit that we tie together with. And finally, what you are putting together is a personalized action plan. Many times the change conversation has to do with prospecting, so what that involves with is putting together a plan that makes sense for that particular individual. So to summarize the 5 action steps that would help a manager be more effective in helping the veteran originator make a leap into the future by making changes in their selling approach is to 1, make small changes. 2, make it a learning experience. 3, show them the facts. 4, show the benefit of making the changes. And 5 is putting together a personalized action plan. So today's takeaway is pretty simple. It's really leading the veteran to change is worth the effort for all the good reasons that I've already mentioned that requires the manager to really drive the process to help the employee conquer their fear and their anxiety. So let's open it for some questions. On the right-hand side, there's a chat feature. Certainly type in any questions you might have. We have one from Frank who asks, what if the employee does not want to be coached? Again, this whole process is another way of talking about coaching. I certainly do get that question quite a bit. I would tell you from a practical standpoint, these types of conversations, 95% of the employees do want to participate in them because they are seeing their results not being as good as they need to be. So the reality is something has to give, and what that is that this type of discussion of the person changing their techniques or selling approach has to occur. So I'd have to say that if the employee does not want to participate in this type of conversation by rejecting the conversation or delaying this type of meeting, that is an early sign that there is a lot of fear and uncomfortableness in the person and that the manager has to make the determination of bringing it to a head. So again, coaching is really a two-way partnership, and if the employee does not want to be part of that partnership, then you're really going to have to look at their current performance and make some hard decisions. The next question I received from Frank, another Frank, is when should the employee be fired? Well, I think we're jumping to the gun. Again, as I've mentioned very early on in this webinar, I think firing is the easy way out. I think what we really are talking about is, again, a situation of uncomfortableness that's based on a fear component, that's based on an anxiety component, that can be resolved through the steps that were already mentioned. But frankly, if you've gone through these steps, then obviously hard decisions need to be made about the individual because, again, it is a two-way process that both the manager and the employee have to be equal partners with. Any other questions that you have, certainly use the chat feature. If you're not able to do that today, certainly email me. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have. I just want to make a couple other comments, and we have resources for you that you might want to check out in addition to previous podcasts. They are on www.patsherlock.com. So we have a lot of great information, a lot of great interviews. You might want to check that out. Also, if you haven't signed up I do a weekly sales blog. Certainly go on to the web page and sign up. I'd be glad to add you to the list and check out the resources side of it.